thought it could be cool to ask Killer a couple of questions since we're both playing this PSO summer soundtrack series. What are your current musical influences? Things are online, but I'm wondering what's been influencing you lately.
I have no idea. It's so mixed up. Depending on what I'm writing, my influences are just all over the place, you know? Right now, because I'm trying to finish a trumpet concerto, I'm listening to a lot of Shostakovich and Prokofiev and Bernstein. Every project has just got different stuff. I mean, certainly there are certain influences that go all the way back for me, and they would be like the Russian composers just kind of brought me into the love of orchestral music along with Bernard Herrmann. So I was simultaneously a film music buff by the time I was a young man, and well before I ever thought of becoming a composer. I was proud of myself for being able to hear scores and recognize, oh, that's Max Steiner, that's Jerry Goldsmith, that's Korngold, and so I was kind of a fan that then got pulled into the art, for lack of a better way to put it. But then behind them floats the giants of the Russians, the great Russians, who sternly look down upon me disapprovingly and tell me I'm worthless. What about you?
It's so funny that you mentioned that because my biggest influences personally are Chopin and Rachmaninoff. But Rachmaninoff, along with Tchaikovsky, that Russian music literature as well, I think it's so dynamic and passion filled, and I feel a lot of that in my piano writing and my work on Arcane. So that's so funny to hear you say that. Also, your trumpet concerto. I have been listening to your violin concerto. I knew it before, but it's so lovely. And I was going to ask you if you had a piano concerto or something else coming up because I'd love that.
Oh yeah, well, this is my fourth concerto. I did a percussion concerto a couple years ago with Colin Curry. That's out on Sony. And this fall, I've got a cello concerto with Gautier Capuçon that's coming out on Warner Brothers, and the premiere of the trumpet concerto will be in Palermo this December.
This is something I'm also very curious about. How do you approach, I know you just talked about instrumental music, but when you're scoring for film, how do you approach scoring a scene for film? You get it, maybe it's temp, but I'm curious how you approach it.
I try to ignore the temp, but I just look at the scene and wait for music to come into my head. On a rare occasions, if a director is really in love with a piece of temp music, which is my greatest misery, I'll pay attention to the tempo of it only and go, all right, he's going to get a very different piece of music, but I'll find the same tempo energy in a different form and hope it connects, so then he doesn't come back going, oh, but the temp's so much more energy, so at least I could provide an equivalent energy in a different piece of music. What about you? I'm curious, when you were scoring Arcane, which I'm a big fan of, by the way.
Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you so much.
Did you have temp music to work around? How did it work?
I think similar here. When I first started on Arcane, not that I ignored the temp, but I kind of had this instinct of, okay, they put something here, I'll go for the same emotion, And
same emotion, right. You have to want to, obviously, you can tell in the temp that they're searching for an emotional kind of goal.
Exactly. And I think that over the course of working on both seasons, it became more, there were certain scenes where I had to go pretty close to the temp and kind of what they were going for, respecting the tempo. And then I think more where they were like, the temp is just a guideline. This should be an emotional violin moment. Go for it,
Yeah, no, it's always good when a director goes, I'm not attached to this temp. And I go, thank you. I did work on a movie once where the director was complaining, and he asked me finally, can you be more Danny Elfman? I said, okay, I'm being as Danny Elfman as I can, but if you mean by that 1985 or something like that, I'm not, I'm trying to interpret. Yeah. What do you mean? Now, I'm curious also for you, how much adaptation did you have to do to create the concert suites for the upcoming concert?
It's interesting because, obviously, like in movies and TV, there's tons of pieces. So I had to definitely do a triage, which ones. And the score of Arcane is very, it is synth. There's electronic elements as well as orchestral. So I think the first thing I did was, I identified, my favorite pieces, the most popular music, what needs to be in the show. And then it was kind of which ones, because I think very electronic synth heavy ones, not that they wouldn't translate, but, I would have to lose a little bit of that essence, And so I picked the ones that I think would fit the orchestral setting the best, as I'm sure you did in your PSO show coming up. But I think that that was the biggest thing, is deciding which of these, I'm very passionate about, I love from the soundtrack, and then which would fit the orchestral, sound the best. But what about yourself? I mean, you've got a lot coming up in that show. A
It,
lot
it
of
was really hard. I had the experience of sitting through two or three concerts before I created these suites of my music and found I was horribly disappointed how it felt on stage. And I realized after a bit with orchestral music, because these were purely orchestral scores, there really is a difference between what records in a studio and what translates on stage. As you know, when we're recording orchestra in the studio, you want more violas, you just push up the fader. You want to hear your woodwinds come through, but it's kind of a lot of sound, you just push up your faders. And on stage, suddenly, oh my God, the woodwinds are lost and there's no fader. So for the Elfman Burton show, which is much of what we're doing in concert in Pittsburgh, but not completely. But it's more than half the show would be that.
Sure.
I had to go back to scratch, and I just created new orchestrations for each piece based on I would listen to how I wanted to hear sound like from the recording, and go, now what do I have to change to get it to work live on stage? And it was months and months of work. It was kind of a huge endeavor. For that show, I had to create 16 suites from 16 different films. And there's also the problem of which cues represent, 5 minute or an 8 minute or 11 minutes. But it was interesting to hear, like, for example, I went to a concert of Pee Wee's Big Adventure and they were playing the Breakfast Machine. And I realized not until that moment that for huge chunks of the piece, the orchestra's doing nothing. It's just the piano going da, 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 da. And
Right.
now in the recording, you hear that as plenty. And then the orchestra comes in, bum, 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 bum. But on stage, I was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I just kind of hear a piano playing. And
Sure.
then the orchestra comes in and it's really big. And then it's just a piano playing for a minute. And it's like, it was a disaster. And so I totally had to redo it to have the orchestra playing pizzicato and playing
Sure.
with the piano. So, okay, they're not just like putting their instruments
Give them
down.
something to do. Right. Right. Right.
Yeah,
It's,
exactly. And also the sound disappearing.
if it's not too much giving away from your Pittsburgh show, was there a specific piece that was maybe most challenging from the ones you readapted, or I'm just so curious, or maybe one of the easiest? Is there
Well,
specific one?
the older the piece, the harder it was to adapt. And I realized now, when I sat putting that together, looking at 30 years of music, that the earlier stuff, I really did a lot of tweaking on the stage at the moment, fut stuff to get the sound. And then by the time I got to later scores, like when I was doing Alice in Wonderland, my orchestration skills had improved. And I had to do very little to that. Whereas with Beetlejuice and Pee Wee and a lot of those early scores, I had to do quite a bit.
It's interesting. In Arcane, there's a piece called Funeral that's during a kind of funeral scene, and it is a montage scene. And so I was able to write what felt to me like a piano piece. I wasn't really scoring to picture that, tons of moments. It was more just this encompassing thing. And I wrote it as a piano concerto type thing, where it's, the piano singing and taking the melody, and then the orchestra, accompanying, and a dialogue. And that I feel like was one where it fits so naturally for Pittsburgh, for the orchestra, because it's already, there isn't a ton of synth elements, electronic things, not a lot of crazy stuff going on. It's already kind of a fit for the orchestra concert hall scene. Which, so anyways, that's just one I was thinking about, that was a fun one.
I was wondering, have you heard them live already? Have you had a chance to work with it? Or
These pieces. So that's one of the most exciting things, is we haven't yet, because this is the
this
first
is
one
your
of
first
these.
time?
It's the first
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
these shows.
No, no, I understand. It's a lot of nail biting first time. Because most of the Elfman Burton stuff, we've done, I think, 80 concerts already. But I have like 5 or 6 new pieces that I've never heard before. So I'm like, oh, okay. We're
It's
doing
exhilarating.
music from the movie Milk, and a score that very few people saw, but I loved, from a movie called Wolfman, and a movie that I just did with Luc Besson called Dracula, that I was very fond of the score, and a piece from Men in Black that's never been performed. So I've got quite a bit of first time stuff. So I'm going to be doing more. Oh my God, how's this going to come out?
But it's
More than I
it's
have been with the. Like next week, I'm playing in Europe, and it's that Elfman Burton. What we call it, Elfman Burton. It's music of Tim
music for
Burton
Elfman.
films.
Right.
and it's 16 suites, but I know it pretty well by now. So I just have to go into the rehearsal and make sure there's no blatant errors or problems, but it should be pretty smooth. Because the more you perform something, you work out typos, you work out the little things, the
Absolutely.
things that kind of, oh, that didn't sound quite, and you make an adjustment. So then, okay, now those adjustments have mostly been made. But now the new stuff, it's like, nope, here I go, back to scratch.
No, absolutely. And it probably keeps it fresh. And then also you improve on those first time, the one you perform for the first time for the next concert. That must keep it so exciting and fun.
Well, look, it was really great meeting you. I think it's great that we're both performing with Pittsburgh. I'm excited about it. I'm imagining you are too, especially if this is like a first listen. It's going to be thrilling, and I wish I could be there. What is that? That's July
July 9th. Yep.
9th.
I
Yes,
here's a week later.
I'm performing in Madrid.
That's so fun.
Or Barcelona, I think. I can't remember. And then we're going and recording that entire concert in London. And so it's a crazy couple of weeks. And then finally from Paris, I go right to Pittsburgh and
Yeah.
close out this 3-week run with this what will be for me very exciting show with this new material. So fingers crossed for both of us.
And
Okay.
no, have a great show, and thank you for doing this, Danny.
Oh, my
Congratulations on
pleasure.
all
No,
your
it was
success.
yeah, it was great meeting you. And again, kudos on Arcane. That my son turned me on to it, and often I watch anime shows with him, and I go, "Oh yeah, that's nice, that's nice." But this one, I really
Oh,
got into. I couldn't wait for each new episode. I loved the music.
that's so great.
It was just a great show, and many congratulations. I know you've got a huge future ahead of you.
Thank you very much, Danny. Your music is an enduring inspiration. So it means a lot coming from you.
Thank you.